Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to my garage, which has kind of turned into a sewing room. I bet you didn't see that coming. I've been working on a weird tank bag contest project that I was going to show you this week, but since I am a little bit far from finishing, I decided that I would just make a little video for you guys, and you can appreciate my glorious tank bag video next week. So I figured while I work on this, I can tell you the story of how I started writing, because Doodle on a Motorcycle asked me specifically if I had made a video about how I started writing, and I have not. I know that a few of you who've been around for a while probably already know this story, or at least I've told parts of it in bits and pieces over the course of the life of this YouTube channel. So here it is, the story of how I started writing all in one place while I work on a weird sewing project. I apologize in advance for the sound of the sewing machine while I tell this story. So I didn't grow up with motorcycles like a lot of people. I was super into horses. I wanted to be a jockey. Super bad. We got horses when I was in high school. At this point, motorcycles would only cross my mind one or two times when I watched Grease 2, and I was like, oh, motorcycles are cool. And you can judge me for that if you want. That's totally fine. But that is like what made me think, oh, motorcycles are a thing. We had four-wheelers and three-wheelers and that kind of stuff growing up, but we never had motorcycles because my brothers were kind of hellions. Anyway, when I moved to Portland, I was going back and forth to Montana a lot because I was terribly homesick. Going back and forth to Montana in Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra costed a lot of money. Close to over $300 every time that I went home, which is a lot for a college student. I conveniently remembered at that point that my grandpa had promised me this old 1979 Suzuki GS 750 when I was really little, and I had never thought about it until I moved in with my grandpa while I was in Portland. Don't you have a motorcycle that's supposed to be mine? Grandpa's like, yeah, but you have to go take the motorcycle endorsement class first. And me being me, I wanted to take it in Montana and not Oregon. So I went, I saved up the money, and I took the Montana MSF course in October 2012. I'll put the correct date up on the screen here. It was cold. I don't recommend taking an MSF course when it is that cold. It's very distracting from the learning process, especially when you're getting up at like 7 a.m. to do drills in a parking lot that's frozen over. One of the days literally had to wait for the parking lot to defrost so we could keep practicing. It was super scary for me, and I feel comfortable saying that now. I wouldn't have told anybody back then, but it was very scary. Like, not in the sense that I genuinely thought that I would hurt myself, but just knowing the amount of power that was at my fingertips, and that if I whiskey throttled, bad things could happen. But I was also very determined. As soon as I had made the decision, I was committed to it. For one, I was drawn to it because it was the next best thing. I couldn't bring my horses to Portland with me. I looked into it. The cost to stable my horses in Portland was like twice the amount of what like normal rent was at that point in time. So I knew going into it that I wanted to learn to ride. Nobody convinced me. Even Grandpa wasn't the one who convinced me. I kind of came up with it on my own. Grandpa was just a huge enabler, and I am so grateful that he was there to influence me while I was learning to ride. Right, getting back to the actual story here. So I took the MSF course in Montana. I came back and I was like, look, Grandpa, I'm certified. So we spent a whole weekend getting that 1979 Suzuki GS 750 running again. It was a bit of a problem child. Like, it makes Lazarus look angelic, in my opinion. The timing was always just a little bit off, so you had to keep your hand on the throttle to keep the bike running. And one night I came home and exhaust started popping really bad, aka backfiring. And I was so freaked out that when I got home, I dropped the bike right in front of the house. And I broke one of the taillights. And Grandpa came out, and he wasn't like genuinely angry, but I could tell I had just hurt his baby. And I replaced the taillight and everything. But after that, I definitely understood I just needed to buy my own bike and have it be done with, because that 79 was like never really going to be mine. It was always going to be Grandpa's baby, and I didn't want to hurt it any more than I already had. About that time, the guy that I was seeing kind of got into an accident with my Oldsmobile. Some little girl in a smart car smashed into the end of it, and I wasn't worried about it because it didn't do any damage to my Oldsmobile. Those things are like tanks. But he was very sorry about it. So he took my car to go get appraised, and the check that her insurance wrote me was like $1,200 for like a tiny dent that didn't do anything to my car. So I took that $1,200 and I was like, I'm gonna buy me a motorcycle. Leading up to actually purchasing my first bike, I was practicing a lot on the 79. I made goals for myself, and I steadily achieved those goals. There's a lot of tangents in the story. So I perused Craigslist. From my experience of replacing the turn signal on Grandpa's bike, I knew that I wanted 80s bike or newer, because finding parts for 70s motorcycles was really hard. I really loved Grandpa's bike because I also wanted something that would get me from Portland to Montana reliably, not rattle me to death, something that was going to be able to handle the high speeds on the highway and not leave me looking for extra power to get around trucks and that kind of stuff. As luck would have it, I found a 1980 Suzuki GS 850, which everybody knows is Lazarus, who's sitting behind me. I was at home. I was in Montana for Christmas. He was in Missoula. And I was like, Dad, can we go look at this motorcycle? Can we go look at this motorcycle? It was listed for $800. It had been on Craigslist since like October or something like that. So I was like, I could probably talk him down. It's been on Craigslist for like 3 months. Nobody has bought it. So my dad went with me to go look at it. It was the dead of winter in Montana, okay? So there's snow, there's ice. It's not the ideal time to be buying a motorcycle. We meet him. He takes us behind the house. The bike doesn't start up immediately, which is never a good sign. He got the battery charged up again after his failed attempts. And I was like, why don't you let me try? Because now I have all this experience with a 79 version of the same bike. She started right up for me. And I was like, okay, that's a good sign. You know what? I want to test ride it. I want to make sure that everything is okay. I want to make sure that I can shift up through the gears. And he kind of looks at me. He's like, you want to test ride this right now. I'm not buying it if I can't test ride it. And so between the guy, my dad, and me, we had to push this like 600-pound motorcycle out of a snowy, icy alleyway onto the street. I took it around the block. I went over a patch of ice. And in my head, everything's happening in slow motion, right? I accepted my fate. I was like, I might die. But if I don't die and I don't drop this bike, she's mine. She's telling me that she is mine. I went over the ice, no problem. I felt my rear slip a little bit, but did not die. I did not drop the bike. This is my bike. And I went back and I was like, this is it. This is mine. I want it. You know, I was ready to hand over the $800 in cash. Like, I had it with me. I was ready. And I went over to him. I was like, what do you think is a fair price? And he's like, well, $600. And I was like, done. I handed $600 over to him. We ran around, got the title transferred, and we loaded Lazarus in a horse trailer and took her home that night. There's a bunch of other stuff that happened in between then and when I actually got to ride her again, but that's a story for a different time. A couple months after I actually got her home, I took my first 500-mile overnight trip to Yakima as kind of a test run to see if I could handle it before I did my first 1,000-mile trip to Montana and back on that bike. 6 months from buying my first bike, I took my first 1,000-mile trip. And it was amazing, and I was hooked. I didn't have the best gear. It was definitely not the best gear. It was very uncomfortable. I was just in love with it. Riding a motorcycle through even places that you already knew is like a totally different experience because you're smelling everything, you're experiencing it. If you're a woman alone on a motorcycle, you get to talk to a lot more people than you do if you're traveling in a truck or a car. Everything felt like it was new. Like I had already gone to Montana and back so many times already in a four-wheel vehicle. Traveling it on a motorcycle was a totally different experience. It opened up so many new things to me, traveling farther. But yeah, that is the story of how I learned to ride and the subsequent falling in love with motorcycle travel in general. Oh, and look at that. We just finished the strappy straps for my tank bag. Awesome. Perfect timing. Oh, pretty. It's the side of my tank bag so that a tripod can just slide right in there. Ta-da! I hope that you enjoyed my little rambly story. I will have video documentation of this weird evolution of a tank bag for you next week, I guess. But if you want more insight on what's going on right now, you can head over to my Instagram and check out the tank bag highlight and my stories, and you can go through the process with me. I want to give a huge shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon. You guys are amazing. You are the reason I keep making videos, and you're the reason that I can eat right now since I got put on furlough until July. If you like this content and would like to support the channel for as little as $1 a month, you can get early access to videos like these over on my Patreon. If that's not up your alley right now, that is absolutely okay. If you would like t-shirts, prints, stickers, all those things, I will leave links down in the description. If you can't do any of that right now, I absolutely understand. I appreciate you guys just for being here every week and watching these videos. Let me know down in the comments why you learned to ride a motorcycle. And in the meantime, guys, I will see you later. You want to see what I have so far? Oh, sorry, stuff falling out. This is the lid. I've got 2 little pockets sewn in already. I'm looking down here because I've got the monitor on my phone. I've got 2 little pockets up here on the top. I've got the lip sewn on. Go check out Instagram if you want to see more of what's going on right now. Or just wait until next week when I'll have the whole video of this process up. And hopefully it'll be finished and I'll have something to show for it that's not just in pieces.